Hello, my name is Megan Huynh and welcome to my Dataset presentation for Unit EDSC3005. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions and the culture of Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation. Today, I will be speaking about my key findings on Indigenous student achievement in literacy and numeracy and outlining how an inquiry cycle can be used to undertake action learning to improve pedagogy and learning outcomes for Indigenous students. Data-driven decision-making is the collection, analysis, examination, and interpretation of data to inform school-based practices and policies. In simple words, it is the use of data by teachers to put forward an action that will improve student learning. The main purpose of data use in most classrooms is to improve teaching and learning activities so students can learn effectively. Eastern cycle of inquiry was used in a framework to collect data and form initial conclusions about the literacy and numeracy achievement of Indigenous students. The purpose of conducting this action research is to find strategies that will improve the literacy and numeracy outcomes of Indigenous students in urban secondary classrooms. There are 4 stages in Eastern cycle of inquiry. 1. Use data to identify a problem. 2. Identify possible solutions. 3. Monitor continuous progress. And 4. Use research to examine the impact. Stage 1, use data to identify a problem, was completed in the first 3 steps of the framework. The data sources used in this action research process are outlined in the first row of the framework. National and state data on Indigenous students' literacy and numeracy achievement were collected from the Closing the Gap Report 2020 and NAPLAN National Report 2021. Regional data on literacy and numeracy achievement at 2 secondary schools with high Indigenous populations were collected from the My School and the School Curriculum and Standards Authority websites. Data was triangulated to reach an informed and valid conclusion about literacy and numeracy achievement for Indigenous students. Data analysis involves presenting data in a visual manner so that it is easily interpretable. Line graphs can be used to track changes over short or long periods of time. Figure 2 is a line graph from the Closing the Gap Report 2020 that shows the percentage of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students from different year groups that met the national minimum standard for reading over a 10-year period. I will be focusing on the Year 9 results in this figure because they are relevant in a secondary education context. The percentage of Year 9 Indigenous students meeting the national minimum standard for reading fluctuated between 2008 and 2018. In 2018, the gap between Year 9 Indigenous students and non-Indigenous students for reading was approximately 20%. From 2008 to 2018, the percentage of Year 9 Indigenous students meeting the minimum standard increased from approximately 71 to 74%. The improvement over the 10 years is minimal and the target for reading was not reached by 2018. Figure 3, also from the Closing the Gap report, shows the percentage of Indigenous students meeting the national minimum standard for numeracy. In 2013, there was a significant decline in the percentage of Year 9 Indigenous students meeting the minimum standard for numeracy. In 2018, the gap between Year 9 Indigenous and non-Indigenous students for numeracy was approximately 14%. From 2008 to 2018, the percentage of Year 9 Indigenous students meeting the minimum standard increased from approximately 72 to 83%. This is a significant improvement and the target was almost met in 2018. Tables can be used to display data in a way that is immediately informative to the user. In 2018, the reading and numeracy targets set by the Australian government were not met nationally. Table 2 shows the states and territories that met the national minimum standards for Year 9 reading and numeracy in 2018. The Australian Capital Territory was the only jurisdiction that met the target for Year 9 reading. Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia and the Australian Capital Territory met the target for Year 9 numeracy. New South Wales, Tasmania and the Northern Territory did not meet the targets for both Year 9 reading and numeracy. The initial conclusions of the data analysis and interpretation of national and state data are summarised in the second step of the framework. It can be concluded that more progress is required to improve the literacy and numeracy outcomes for Year 9 Indigenous students nationally. Balga and Girraween Senior High School both have a high Indigenous population, and the literacy and numeracy results of these schools will allow for a sound representation of the literacy and numeracy achievement of Indigenous students in an urban secondary context. Balga Senior High School is an urban secondary school located 20 kilometres north of Perth, Western Australia. Balga Senior High School has 534 students and an Indigenous student population of 20%. Neighbouring Balga Senior High School is Girraween Senior High School, which has 442 students and an Indigenous student population of 20%. Balga Senior High School has an ICSE value of 878, whereas Girraween Senior High School has an ICSE value of 901. Table 4 allows for the comparison of Year 9 NAPLAN results between all Australian students, Balga and Girraween Senior High School. The Year 9 NAPLAN results of both schools are below the results of all Australian students for all domains. Bar graphs are effective for comparing results between groups and to track changes over time. Figures 4, 5 and 6 are bar graphs that show the percentage of students meeting the standard for reading, writing and numeracy by the end of Year 12. Figure 4 shows that 55 to 66% of Year 12s are meeting the standard for reading at Balga Senior High School compared to the 86 to 89% at Girraween Senior High School. There is at least a 20% gap between the two schools despite their similar socio-cultural background and Indigenous student population. Figure 5 shows the percentage of students meeting the standard for writing by the end of Year 12. In 2020, 80% of Year 12 students at Balga Senior High School met the standard for writing. However, only 60% of students met the standard in 2019 and 66% of students met the standard in 2021. Over 80% of students at Girraween Senior High School met the standard for writing in 2019, 2020 and 2021. Figure 6 shows the percentage of students meeting the standard for numeracy by the end of Year 12. In 2020, the percentage of students that met the standard for numeracy at Balga and Girraween Senior High School was very similar, about 77%. However, in 2021, the percentage of Balga students that met the standard for numeracy decreased. The percentage of students that met the standard was consistently over 75% at Girraween Senior High School. The initial conclusions from the data analysis and interpretation of regional data are summarised in the third step of the framework. It can be concluded that the Year 9 NAPLAN results for both Balga and Girraween Senior High School are below the results of all Australian students. Even though Balga and Girraween Senior High School have similar socio-cultural backgrounds and the same Indigenous student population, Girraween has a considerably higher percentage of Year 12s meeting the standards for reading, writing and numeracy. Other quantitative data that would have been useful include the percentage of Indigenous students that completed the NAPLAN and the average NAPLAN results of Indigenous students at Balga and Girraween Senior High School. Stage 2 of Easton's inquiry cycle is to identify possible solutions. It can be concluded that the percentage of students meeting the standards for literacy and numeracy at Balga Senior High School can be improved. The Indigenous student population at the school is considerably high for an urban secondary school, so the implementation of strategies to support the learning of Indigenous students would be suitable. Student learning and retention of knowledge and skills are enhanced when teaching strategies are adapted to the needs of students. Younger Porter's 8 Ways of Learning framework provides 8 interconnected pedagogical practices that can be used in the classroom to support learning for Indigenous students. Individual students will have their own learning styles, so 8 ways can be used to explore different pedagogical strategies that will best suit the students in a particular classroom. Some strategies that teachers can implement include scaffolding, yarning circles, and involving the Indigenous community in the classroom. Stage 3 of Easton's inquiry cycle is monitor continuous progress. This will involve the yearly collection of NAPLAN achievement data and Year 12 literacy and numeracy achievement data to monitor the literacy and numeracy progress of Indigenous students. NAPLAN and OLNA data will provide useful information about trends, patterns, and student achievement progress of Indigenous students over time. Stage 4 of Easton's inquiry cycle, use research to examine impact, will involve the analysis and examination of literacy and numeracy data to make informed decisions about teaching and learning. This will determine if there are any implications with the 8 Ways of Learning framework and if any modifications need to be made to the strategies applied in the classroom. Literacy and numeracy results from the NAPLAN and OLNA can be collected yearly to determine whether 8 Ways is effective in increasing the percentage of Indigenous students meeting the national minimum standards for literacy and numeracy. In conclusion, the focus of this presentation was to highlight my key findings on the literacy and numeracy achievement of Indigenous students and outline how Easton's cycle of inquiry can be used to undertake action research to improve the learning outcomes of Indigenous students. Thank you for listening.